Everyone, welcome to this morning's episode of Learn Lounge. It is Thursday today, believe it or not. I have to keep checking that. I don't know what day it is anymore. Welcome to our chat today with Toby Storie-Pugh. We're going to get started in about a minute or so. We're just waiting for the last few people to join in. We just want to make sure that they're not missing off the first half of the talk. So we'll give them a few more seconds just to get in and get involved, and then we'll be getting started. In the meantime, though, make sure that you're following us on social media. Our Twitter handle is @Springpod. I've made it my mission to get us to 2,000 followers before we end our series of Learn Lounge webinars in a couple of weeks. So make sure you join us on there. Go give us a follow and let us know that you're watching as well by using the hashtag Learn Lounge. And if you've got any thoughts or comments about today's session, then feel free to let us know on there as well. If you do have any questions for Toby while we're going through the presentation and he's talking away, then use the Q&A feature, which is on the webpage in front of you. If you send through those questions, I'll then be able to see them. And we've got a dedicated time at the end after Toby's spoken for a Q&A session. So let us know any questions that you've got in there. Honestly, it's such a fantastic and fascinating talk. So we really can't wait to get started. So like I said, we'll get started in just a minute. We're also going to be fundraising for the Children's Trust. I'll talk more about that at the end of the presentation after the Q&A about how you can donate. We had the CEO of the charity, Dalton Leon, on the other day, and it's such an amazing charity, and the work that they do for children with brain injuries and rehabilitating them is absolutely fantastic. So we'll let you know how you can donate. No matter how big or small your donation, every little helps with them. And tomorrow we've got Sophie Darlington on, who is a BAFTA award-winning wildlife filmmaker and cinematographer. She's absolutely fabulous. So make sure that you tune in for that as well. We'll post more about that on our social media @Springpod. If you want to catch up on sessions that we've had previously, then you can go to our website, springpod.co.uk, and just visit the Learn Lounge section, where you can see all of the replays of our previous talks totally for free. And you can book yourself in for any more that we've got coming up. So you'll be able to see the schedule on the website and book yourself in for those as well. So make sure that you do. We're going to get started in just a second with Toby Storie-Pugh, and we're going to be talking about his expeditions and his really, really interesting career. So like I said, if you've got any questions for him while we're going through, make sure you use the Q&A feature, and make sure you're following us on social media as well. Q&A spoken about. Like I said, we're trying to get to 2,000 followers on Twitter, and tomorrow we've got Sophie Darlington, who is a BAFTA award-winning filmmaker, who will have so much to talk about as well. Right, let's get started. First things first, Toby, welcome to Learn Lounge. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session with me, Joe. I hope you've been enjoying some of what the talks have brought you so far. For those of you who are new, Learn Lounge is a new series brought to you by Springpod, where we bring inspirational career stories directly to you and delivered by athletes, influencers, entrepreneurs, and so many more. We're bringing you world-class speakers to teach you some of their tips and tricks for how to forge your own career path. So we've had some incredible speakers, including the CEO of the Children's Trust, like I mentioned earlier, Dalton Leon. We've also had the ex-England international cricketer Monty Panesar, and Olympian Anna Hemmings, and many, many more. So if you've missed any of those, like I mentioned earlier, you can catch those on demand via the Learn Lounge website. And just a few pointers before we start. The talk should last around 40 minutes. Don't forget to ask questions to our guests and join the conversation using our social media hashtag Learn Lounge. And like I mentioned, we'll be raising money for the Children's Trust as well. This morning, we're joined by international explorer and social entrepreneur Toby Storie-Pugh. Now, Toby has a proven track record of affecting powerful change across the world through his adventures. He leads world-class expeditions, which are often designed to help create sustainable social impact. And most recently, he's been involved in the Walk the Congo, which is an attempt to walk the entire length of the Congo River, about 3,000 miles or so. And Toby has also worked alongside passionate advocates for social causes, and he is driven by his family motto, Nil Timent, which is Latin and it translates to fear nothing. And it's also his Twitter handle. So if you want to find him on there, you can do. Thanks for being with us this morning, Toby. Welcome to Learn Lounge.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be here, and welcome to everyone that's joining us today.
Now, just tell us, how did you become involved in social exploration?
Well, first, I think it's quite nice to be on a program where you're talking about people with career paths, because I think to try and describe my, 20 years of adult life as a career path would be a bit of a stretch of the imagination. Therefore, to answer that question, I probably had to kind of unpick it a little bit, because it really was a wiggly old path at times, and largely, what I want to look at is how a sort of mix of nature, how I was born, nurture, how I was brought up, and then, the things that happened to me, good luck, bad luck, and everything in between, to ultimately have nudged me towards this place where I am right now, as you talked about, Joe, preparing to do this walk down the Congo River. And I look back. Can I jump on the slides now? So you can see. Well, we'll start off with here. This is just a panoramic of an extremely wide bit of the Congo River, which we'll get back to later on. But it's a good place to start is here, because that's me on the left there. You're looking every inch the international explorer in my shorts and St. Faith's blazer. And I look at that picture, and I guess I was about 11 there, and I hadn't really sort of quite hit my physical spurt yet, clearly. And I thought, how did I go from that kind of fairly timid, although I was outside climbing trees every day and doing all that stuff, it was there, but I was still pretty kind of timid little thing, to not quite such a timid little thing now. And it's, it does kind of slightly, for me, it just, it's sort of slightly, I wryly chuckle, because I'm not quite sure how. And I think, a key thing was that, like I said, I was outside climbing trees even then. Like, we were digging tunnels, we were exploring our neighbor, we were out there, tormenting the local farmers by sneaking into their farms and stealing, sugar beet or something worthless. And it was an instinctive thing. And that has been, I think, a key trait. If I look back at, before I had a real vision for where I wanted to go with my life, and that was only relatively recently, it was an instinctive thing where it just made sense. I didn't have any particular interest in, as I got older, in sort of going into town and smashing stuff up. I wanted to be out in the woods and in the forests. I think undoubtedly, like I said, if you're born a certain way, if you've got a certain mindset, that is a starting point. But there's a huge amount that goes into that, is obviously inputted from that, and most obvious being one's parents. So my mum and dad were cut from a slightly different cloth. This is my dad's on the right front of that picture, and that is a photo taken by a German guard at a prisoner of war camp in Germany in about 1943, they'd just been caught as they've tried to escape from Colditz Castle. And as you can tell, they're fairly miffed about that, because they're just getting out. He was a renowned escaper during the Second World War. He had the most number of escape attempts during the course of the war. And despite being a fairly slight thing, 5'7", really kind of lightly built, was an absolute force of nature. And he met my mother, who's 26 years his junior, who was a nun in California. So my mum's American, my dad's very British. My mum joined a convent, spent 5 years as a nun before deciding that wasn't the life for her, came to the UK, met my dad. They were engaged 45 minutes after meeting. So you had these two very, very different people, very different in many ways, but both with a very strong sense of self, both with a very strong sense of vocation. More obviously, my dad, with his sort of feats of daring do, would be the influence, the bigger influence. Both played an important role in creating, me as I am today. My mother, in terms of sense of, I think, a sense of moral responsibility for our own actions, but for the role that we can, the influence we can have on the world. So the kind of the key early turning point in my life was that I got, having been an army scholar from the age of 15, which guaranteed me, all I ever wanted to do as a child was join the army. My dad obviously had been in the military. but I just loved the idea of being a soldier. Won a scholarship at 15 that guaranteed me a place at Sandhurst, so I didn't even have to think about it again. Carried on with school, went to university, packed my bags, ready to go to Sandhurst. Went to a final medical and got failed for having a very mild skin condition. So at 21 years old, suddenly the only career that had ever been of interest to me was finished, and it was, as you can imagine, absolutely devastating. Looking back now, I realised I didn't know how hard it would be to fill the gap that I expected the army to fill, because I didn't realise then there was nothing else that really presented the same mental, physical, moral challenge that the army was going to provide. And it definitely precipitated what might call a sort of a quarter life crisis, which was probably a bit of a blessing in disguise, because a quarter life crisis you have time to regroup and come back from. Midlife crisis is a lot harder, and I was able to take what was it's very easy to look back now and forget about it. It was a dreadful time, because I didn't all your friends are off, they've just graduated, they're off doing their thing, they're all happy, they're making money, and you're sitting there feeling like a bit of a lost soul. And when you've been on a very regimented timeline really your whole life through to that point, and you've met all you've done your GCSEs, you've done your A levels, you've got your degree, and then suddenly time is not being marked off with a series of sort of annual achievements. It was very, very hard. But again, this kind of instinct kicked in, and I just instead of, I had a business degree, but had no desire whatsoever to sort of track a path into London. So instead tracked a path out to India, and on these chance meetings, I met a bloke on a bus who was a renowned Indian mountaineer, and he invited me to come and stay at this amazing place, the Himalayan Adventure Institute, which just, if that doesn't sort of stir the blood, I don't know what will. And we had an amazing time there. He basically taught me everything he knew, and it felt right. Most important, every time I'd go back there and walk down that path, and you can see in the background where the camp was on the top of that hill, I would feel a sense of coming home. I didn't really understand it at the time, and it still, it was a strain. I was trying to work out how to fund this kind of stuff. But I knew that when I got there, I felt like I was amongst my own people, and it was where gave me a kind of base to begin to examine what it was that was important to me. And a critical point was when the institute had arranged for a group of former street children from Delhi to come up and do what we call a basic adventure course, really basic stuff, just to give them a chance really to get out of the city. And I'll never forget that you can just see in the background, there's an artificial climbing wall. Anytime groups would come up, and mainly they were corporate groups or they were, private schools, they would set them up on the wall to have a go, and inevitably, 3 out of 10 would make it up. And then we had this group of, former street children dressed in, rags and flip flops, and every single one of them shot up to the top of that wall, and it was like, and just your heart went out to them, just seizing the opportunity that they've been given, and just this ferocious desire to take advantage of an opportunity. And something clicked to me then, and I just thought, okay, all right, this makes sense. And I don't know what it is. I don't really know where to take it now, but something there really, really makes sense to me. And so just, again, it's very organic. Like I said, literally until I'd say 10 years ago, and we'll get to that, but there wasn't this vision. It just felt right. And it was about, okay, follow that feeling. And luckily, I was so fortunate. This is where, so fortunate that, my parents, who could have been putting pressure on me, having given me a expensive private education, could have been putting pressure on me to go and get a job, get into the city, start earning your keep. They were entirely encouraging of me just taking this time to think and explore myself as much as the outside world. So I began to get more involved in development projects. This is me sleeping rough on the streets of Delhi for a film that we did. And there's the filmmaker is to my left, and then beyond him are these 3 street children that we joined and filmed for about 6 weeks and lived with them, which was to date probably the hardest thing I've ever done. A case where there was actually, I'm a very hopeful person. Generally, everything I do is predicated on a expectation that you can make a difference. And genuinely, we left that emotionally and physically shattered because we didn't feel in that situation we could actually make much of a difference. So I don't know. It was an experience that I'm grateful for, like every experience, but it was one where I left feeling helpless to affect much change. But it did, it did kind of, it showed me the value of getting down, literally in this case, at street level and observing. The adventurous spirit was still strong. I did this little. Never having had any interest whatsoever in motorbikes, I went to India for the first time. Just there's this beautiful bike there, which you can just see, which I'm riding there. It's called a Royal Enfield, which is an old British bike that was bought when the company went bankrupt. It was bought by India, I believe, in the late 50s, and they produce them to this day. And it's just a really beautiful classic British bike. And I fell in love with it, and decided to ride back to England on one. And never having ridden a motorbike, I had a friend of mine, or a guy actually I was a taxi driver who I met, and I go, do you know anyone who could teach me how to ride a bike? And he goes, oh, I could teach you how to ride a bike. And so he taught me how to ride a bike. We had a very poor start to our trip, to his training, when he came to get me at 5 o'clock in the morning from my little hotel in Kathmandu. And I didn't want to be out later than that because it's so much traffic. And we got about 200 yards and the bike ground to a halt. And I was like, and I just bought this bike. I had my last, I bought it for like £500. And I thought, oh God, I bought an absolute lemon. I didn't, I was like, oh, I can't believe it. It's all the money I had in the world. And we're like, oh God. And we realized we hadn't turned the fuel tap on. It's like.
So you said you wanted to drive back to England on that bike? Yeah.
So basically, I mean, I bought this bike. I bought that bike in Kathmandu. Because I wanted to do this classic, like back in the sort of 60s and 70s, it was a classic overland route, like UK through the Central Asian republics, and then to finish in Kathmandu, and the reverse. But typically, it was kind of heading out from Europe, and yeah, it's just a classic route, and it was just a classic bike. And honestly, it cost me less to do that than to pretty much to fly home. I bought a bike, did the whole thing in a month without a budget, pretty much no budget. Slept rough most nights, and got it done. But I mean, leaving Kathmandu, I said goodbye to my friend who became, the guy who was teaching me, who became very, and still is to this day, a close friend. Said goodbye to him, and the longest single ride I'd done a day was 26 kilometers at that point, and it was 8,900 kilometers home. And I was leaving. I was like, it was so. The thought of driving back to England from Kathmandu was just so ridiculous. It was like terrifying. So I left him, said goodbye, and literally got into a crash on the way out of Kathmandu. Some guy biking, and I smashed into a tree and had to go and it broke the brake pedal on the bike. It was a horrible start to the thing. But once you got started, it was okay. And a month later, I drove home. I drove down the driveway home, and had made it. And it was an incredible experience. And it was an illustration of why you've got to take that first terrifying step. If I'd had any other option at that point, I think I don't know. I remember thinking, I just don't want to do this. And I think I said to myself, just do 50 kilometers today, and then stop. That's all you got to do. Just do 50 kilometers. But as soon as I got going, it was fine. I did 250k that day, and I never looked back. And I think for me, that although it was nothing. I look back at it now and you think, what was the big deal? But it was just day in, day out. You're by yourself, of course. If I go through here, you'll see how. I think I took a picture here of. So this is me. Typically, that's me fully loaded up with my my sort of
your life, basically.
Yeah, and it was a brilliant old bike. To be fair, they have a reputation for being the most mechanically horrible bikes ever, but mine never, ever had a problem. I had a puncture once, but otherwise it just ticked along brilliantly. It was incredible. A very, very close relationship with that bike. But that was a typical night. That was actually at a little road stop, still in India, and just pull up, get a plate of dal, pull the sleeping bag out and get a few hours sleep. And it never felt, I look back now, I think it doesn't look very smart, but it never felt bad at the time. But I guess it was. This is actually in West Pakistan. It was actually the only time in my life, probably the only time in my life, from a human point, I ever feared for my life. And it was between It was basically leaving from Quetta, which is the capital of Baluchistan, and it was going across to the Iranian border. So Quetta's behind that, in that picture somewhere, 100 kilometers behind, and Iran was about 300 kilometers ahead. And it was like this. It's a pretty decent little road. It wasn't in and of itself terribly challenging, but it was. It was. I mean, to the left of that picture, there was a range of hills, and then beyond those hills was Helmand province. So we're probably within 50 kilometers as the crow flies. So it very much was, and this was 2005. So very much at the height of the tensions there, and those tensions obviously came across the border, and I got followed by a bunch of guys who jumped in the back of a 4x4 when they saw me coming through this little town and followed me. And there was nowhere, as you can see, there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to run. And I went over a little crest, like in that picture there, kind of over the crest of a little hill, and just happened to run into a Pakistani army patrol. It was just like, hey guys, I'm going to spend the night with you tonight. So that was pretty nerve-wracking. That's the only time I really thought, this is not looking good. But I got through that and went to Iran. Had an amazing time in Iran, which turns out to be my favorite country. It turned out to be the favorite country I've probably ever been to. And I think that's, that, for example, is a great example right now in a country that's been vilified so much in the media recently. And all I can think of is the wonderful experiences I had there. And that's why the value of going to these places and seeing it for yourself, and for better or worse. I don't think I've ever really been negatively, disappointed. I've never been disappointed. Only ever been had really positive experiences. So
what was it about Iran that, that is so great? Because you're right, everyone in the media always just hears the negatives. If you could pick anything that is actually a genuine positive about the country, what would it be?
Just I think the foundational warmth of the culture. It's there. The leadership, has been there's been dreadful leadership for a long time. But that Farsi. The culture is just one which is incredibly historically welcoming. So I had an accident in India. So just before crossing into Pakistan, I badly cut my leg, and it had stitches in it. And I, on the day, I think 2 days before that picture was taken there, I'd gone to jump on my bike, and I'd ripped out all the stitches. I caught it on the fuel cap of the bike, which stood up proud of the fuel tank itself, and it just ripped them all out. And it was literally, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing I could do. There's blood pouring down my leg, and it got really infected. So I actually went into Iran, just emotionally exhausted from Pakistan, which was just exhausting. Super relieved to be there, and suddenly coming down with getting very, very sick. Actually, when I look at it now, it's probably just like I didn't die from sepsis, but I was a bit kind of probably naive about that. But I just felt rough, and I'll never forget. I'll give you an example. So I pulled over to this little a road. The roads in Iran are just immaculate. Beautiful, best roads I've ever driven in my life. But it looks very much still like that picture there. It's deserty. It's stunningly beautiful. And there's tea stop. You can stop for tea. The Iranian tea is just amazing. And I stopped for a cup of tea. This little roadside stool shack. And the guy could see my jeans. I only had one pair of jeans, only one pair of trousers with me, and you could see they were pretty much caked with blood. And we kind of mimed, what's that? And I showed him, and old guy, with nothing, clearly with nothing, just scraping a living. And while I had my tea, he went back into the back of his little shop and ruffled around, and came out with his tube of ointment that he had, and came out and insisted I take it, and refused to accept payment for it. And every time I'd stop, if I stopped on the side of the road, the Iranians are great picnickers, which is not something that many people know. And they all drive Peugeot. There's a model of Peugeot. I don't know quite what the deal with it was, but suddenly everyone basically drives the same model of, back then, everyone drove the same model of kind of 1970s white Peugeots. Or maybe the Renault. They're French cars. I'm sure there's some political reason why the French got, able to sell their cars there. And they drive around, they, stop on the side of the road, lay out a cloth, food comes out, samovar gets, I think, boiling the tea. And it's just, it's so ubiquitous, and it's a lovely thing. And it's a very normal, particularly after Pakistan, which we were very warm in many ways, still felt very different from anything I'd ever met before. Iran it felt incredibly normal in many ways. It felt like it's an extended Mediterranean culture is what I felt. And if I stopped then, 100 yards up the road, I would inevitably be invited to come and have a cup of tea, or did I need fuel, or did I need anything else? And it was so consistent that it, for me, just left such an amazing, memory of the place. So I didn't actually stay in Tehran, but I went round Tehran on the day of a big local football derby, and there was huge traffic jams. And I'll never forget being stuck between two very amicable, but kind of, sort of a friendly version of a Man City Man U rivalry, and they were sort of chucking grapes at each other, and it was all done in high spirits. And I was involved. They invited me in to come and stay with them and stuff. So it was lovely. And I if I could advocate for one place we'll get onto this in terms of the Congo, but in terms of a place where the representation is so badly skewed against reality. And it's not to say there aren't issues. I think one's always, whenever you're discussing these type of things, always talking about how, they're never black and white, these issues, right? But as a place that I would go back to tomorrow, Iran is at the top of my list, and I would encourage anyone who has the opportunity to go and see it and just experience that warmth and welcome.
Well, speaking of that, do you not find it quite disappointing now that if any one of us tried to sort of, obviously not in this particular current climate because no one can go anywhere at the moment, but in normal circumstances, if anyone tried to just get up and go to Iran, the Foreign Office would have something to say about it, and it's probably quite sad actually that you can't just visit countries like that anymore, considering the experiences that you've had. You said it's such an amazing country, and because it's so vilified in the media, if people try and go there, people think it's for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I bought a rug on eBay about a few months ago, and it was originally, this is kind of off target, but it kind of shows how this stuff has ripple effects. I bought a rug on eBay from a British buyer living in London that was originally made in Tabriz in Iran, and I got my PayPal account got blocked because they'd somehow picked up on the eBay transaction this Tabriz thing.
No way.
I know it's obviously, I know because PayPal is a US corporation, it's a US corporation, and it obviously got flagged for the wrong reasons, but it just made me feel very sad because even if I'd bought that from a Tabriz rug maker, that'd have been a wonderful thing, because that's a tradition of, centuries old tradition. That would be money going to someone who undoubtedly would be fascinating to sit down and speak to. And yet everyone gets put into the same pot. Obviously the US particularly recently, it's a complex subject, but we think the current administration doesn't really have much in the way of a nuanced approach to foreign policy, but just that bludgeoning very rarely works. And it particularly hurts when you know that it is disproportionately affecting people who would happily see their own poor leaders, banged up. So like I say, it's the hassle of getting there. And it was, even back then, it was certainly, I remember it being one of the hardest visas to get. There was a long process to get one, but as it is, however hard it is, it's worth it a million times over. I just don't think, particularly if you're able to drive around, make sure to get your own transport. It's a huge country. I thought I got to the Iranian border and thought I was kind of halfway home. I looked and I realized I'd gone about like a quarter of the way. It was like, oh my God. And I don't know the other thing. This is where I wanted to talk about really, the pressure of this type of lifestyle on the people that suffer most really are the parents. Because I had an unfortunate thing where because Iran, I didn't have a mobile phone, and I was, like I said, I was quite sick, so I was kind of had my head down, just going for it. And I'd made an error. I told my mum that I'd ring her on like the day after I got into the country, and I forgot to do so, or didn't bother, I suppose. And for 8 days, so then they saw that I'd taken money out in Pakistan, and you can't take money out in Iran because it still isn't connected, I don't think, to the international kind of credit card networks. But she had all my account details to kind of, just in case I needed them to, so she could see I'd had that money had been taken out of my account when she knew I was already in Iran. So that shouldn't have been possible, when actually what it was, I'd taken money out in Pakistan. It had just taken 3 days to come through the system. So there's her thinking, oh my God, I know he's in Iran. I know he can't get money out in Iran. but money's come out of his account. Therefore, he must have been mugged and killed before he even got there.
No.
And there's me merrily bashing. 8 days it took me to cross Iran. So I have all the emails. That she sent to. She said she was in constant contact with the Foreign Office in Islamabad, in Tehran, and in Ankara, in Turkey, and trying to track me down. And it was only, I don't laugh like that, but it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't funny. They literally had like prayer meetings. Only when I bought, and so you're not using credit cards, so nothing's happening on the account except this $500 withdrawal that didn't show where it's from. It just said a date. The only reason they finally knew, I was merrily just muddling along, was when I bought fuel. When I crossed the border from Iran into Turkey and I used a credit card to buy fuel in Turkey, they finally saw that I was all right. 8 long days. So, here's to all the mums and dads out there who are seeing their kids go off to, play adventurer. And I was always aware of it. It wasn't done callously. It was just done not very clever. So that brings me on to this. So then, of course, I think, get that one out of the system, won't do that again. But then ended up deciding to do another one, which was to ride from the UK, well, actually from France, where my mum and dad were at the time, from France down to South Africa and back. And that's obviously that's Kilimanjaro there in the background. It's a quite funny story. I'd gone out with this girl for a couple of years, and she was at that time volunteering in Nairobi, and I thought, how can I impress her? Why don't I motorcycle to Nairobi and turn up there and impress her? The fun sidebar to that, she's now married to my best friend. Luckily, it was all good. And I was like, I was best man at his wedding, at their wedding, and it's all worked out well. But that's how it all started. And so I rode down there and realised, if I'd gone to Kenya, I might as well. And that's pretty much halfway from. If you look at the map, it's pretty much halfway from Cairo to South Africa is Nairobi. I figured if I'd gone that far, I might as well carry on to South Africa. Then realised it was going to cost me more to ship my bike back and fly back than to ride back. So I rode the whole way back from South Africa, back through West Africa to France. And so I can't see what this is next. That's that. And then it was a really great adventure. This is in Angola, it was Angola again a fun place that obviously particularly back then fairly recently come out of a prolonged and bloody civil war, and I certainly had I was pretty I was nervous-ish getting in there. I had a terrible time getting a visa to get in there. Thought I was going to have to turn around. Could not get a visa. Finally managed to talk my way into one. Crossed the border. There's no roads. There were 23,000 kilometers of tarmac roads before the war. And at that point, there was like 200 kilometers of tarmac roads left. It was amazing. It was amazing. It was brilliant fun on a dirt bike like that. But it was a terrible picture into what that kind of prolonged violence does to the infrastructure of a country. But this was actually where I sort of really just remembered. So I got hit by there's a lot of Chinese construction firms still are, and certainly then doing big infrastructure projects in around Africa, and they were doing a huge road building project in Angola, and I got hit by one of their trucks as I was crossing a bridge, and smashed up the front of the bike, dislocated my shoulder, and got stuck with this. I was got stuck in there, not stuck. I mean, they were forced to host me in their Chinese labor camp for 2 weeks while I couldn't leave the country to fix my bike. So I had to send someone out to get spare parts. My visa was single entry only, so I couldn't leave. My shoulder was killing me. So I rang my mum just to tell her to make sure my insurance was up to date. So I managed to get out. Mum, I've had an accident. Then my phone died and there was I could not get hold of her.
Oh no.
So that was another good one for Mum. So it was a great adventure. I mean, but it was for a place that had, as a place that for me, was somewhere I was nervous about going. I mean, just such a wonderful, warm, welcoming place. And my sadness there was that I don't speak Portuguese. I had a phrase book and I lost it before I got there. So it just was a shame not to be able to communicate more, because there was such obviously a desire to talk, and I have nothing but great memories from my time in Angola. Again, it's a very big country. It took me quite a long time to get through, particularly on pretty rough roads like that. But it was just overwhelmingly positive. Again, I never really learned how to mend a bike. That's my that's my 25-pound Amazon toolkit there. And this was funny because I broke down on this empty road in Congo, and I think the brake pad pretty much welded itself to the tire, and I could not get it off. And all I need, I had lots of things I didn't have, but one thing I didn't have was a hacksaw to hack it off. And unbelievably, this kid there on the left there, he's slightly just, it's like you just see him in the distance, like miles away. There's like a solitary bicyclist, and he's half an hour later, he's still on his way in. And he comes along. He has one thing on his bike. I don't know where he's going. He has one thing hanging over his handlebars, and it was a hacksaw.
Brilliant.
He stopped, and we hacked off the brake pad. And for the next, I don't know, a couple of 6,000 miles, I got by with one brake because I didn't have a replacement pad. And actually, the speedometer broke in like Ethiopia for 3/4 of Africa. I didn't know how fast I was going or how far I've gone. So, but it doesn't matter. It's amazing sometimes. Fate chucks you a helping hand. And Congo the same. I went into there, fairly nervous. Again, it's places with some bad recent history, and had nothing but amazing positive experiences, and very much queued me up to believe that there was, as we'll see, things to be done there. I thought that I just had to go back. But the big thing that came out of that trip, in particular, was that I started a school, and originally it was a children's home and school, but it's now segued into purely a school called Flying Kites. Like I said, my friend and her roommate from college had been volunteering in Nairobi for this would have been their third sort of summer vacation away, coming over, raising money, and this was at an orphanage and school in central Nairobi. But we kind of put our heads together and talked. How would we do this if we were starting from scratch? Like, how would you raise kids if you had no limits on how you were going to do it? And they'd been very heavily influenced by a brilliant development. He's a practitioner, but he's a philosopher, a guy called Dr. Paul Farmer, who just felt that it was our moral obligation to give those who are in most desperate need the best possible care. And it's not a natural thing to do in development, very often because funding doesn't allow for it, very often because the circumstances certainly don't make it easy. But we had the opportunity, with a blank sheet of paper, to say, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to create a world-class school here. That was in 2007. Well, that picture was in 2006 while I was doing that bike ride. But we started it in 2007. We bought land up in the Aberdare Mountains, just north of Nairobi, and it's like, Nairobi. I love Nairobi, but it's expensive, B, it's crowded, it's polluted. There's a much higher crime rate, and all of these things, like these foundational factors, we felt could be overcome just by choosing a better place to be. So there's a little video coming up which gives you shows the neighbourhood. It's just beautiful. It's hills. I mean, it looks a bit like sort of Scottish moorland. It sits at about 2,600 meters and goes up higher than that. So you've got no malaria, which is that's a big structural issue. Got amazingly fertile land. You can actually buy land. You can afford to buy land. And it just felt like a place that was going to be good to raise children. And we very much reflected on our own lives growing up. I grew up in the countryside. The others pretty much did as well. And we asked a very simple question, and we would ask people, what would you want for the child in your life? It's a really simple question. If just what would you want if this was your child? How would you want to do it? And so I think we can jump. These are like our first group of kids here, and you could see very clearly, like within very short order, once just simply had good nutrition, like you can see, and it's a very sad thing in a way, that the difference between the kids that we were looking after and the ones who were, living still in kind of fairly impoverished circumstances, just how physically larger they were. The skin is darker, has better, it just has a glow to it. Teeth are better, eyes are better. All these really sort of simple, really obvious physical indicators of a better health. I think we've got a little video that's going to be queued up about now. So I'll hand that over to the tech to pull that one up, and that will give and you can kind of get an idea for this incredible environment.
There's something very powerful about a kid that
has gone to bed hungry and really knows.
There was times I did not eat the whole day. I was always afraid.
It was too hard for me.
I was beaten on behalf of my brothers and sisters.
These kids, they don't have a shoulder to cry on.
We are their mothers.
Most people believe that if you're born in Africa, you're born to struggle. Whatever we are doing here at Flying Kite will benefit the whole world.
So so anyone who's interested in that, it's flyingkites.org, and it's been as a battle, it's been a formative phase of my life, and I'm incredibly fortunate to have a co-founder who was unbelievably determined to see it through, and it was an interesting an inflection point, because there was an awful lot of people who disagreed with what we were doing. They thought it was wrong. Why spend $5,000 per child per year when you could spend $1,000 per child per year and they're still getting an education? And it's a subtle thing. It was about, yes, you could do that, but you will never have a chance of fundamentally altering the bigger picture. We saw an opportunity there. You've got people, again, I'm very fortunate. I come from, had an incredibly comfortable middle-class upbringing. And it was hard for me to directly understand what it felt like to come from the place of, a life of such, where life is so fragile, so delicately balanced, where one bad crop can leave you, completely at the mercy of, you're completely at the mercy of bad luck. But what that does give is this, like I touched on, where we're talking about the children who came up to the Climate Institute in India. When you are in that situation and you have an opportunity, you grab it with both hands, because you know damn well that it is going to be could be the difference between, literally living and dying, but certainly potentially the difference between a life of grinding poverty and a life of fulfillment. That for most of us would hope is one that is at least a reasonable expectation. One of the most moving things is the parents of the children who are at the school, who are so determined to see their children have an education, because they know that is an opportunity that is missed them by, and they're damned if their children are not going to have the chance to lead a fulfilled life. But it uniquely, I think it's you look at great leaders in history, and the ones who have come from nothing, they're never going to lose that knowledge of what it's like to be at the bottom of the pile. But it's so rare that they're able, because of structural factors that limit their ability to simply get education, to do anything beyond trying to sew up, beyond trying to struggle to survive, to actually be able to rise up and be in a place where they can have influence. So what we saw was the chance to take children who had a very tough start in life, to give them this incredible education and support to do whatever it is they wanted. There was never the idea that you have to go and be you don't have to go and be anything. You do whatever it is you want to be, and we will support you towards that goal. But in an environment where there is definitely, there's a clear emphasis on social justice and social activism, and to at least make sure that should there be that desire, you'll have the tools to do it. And it's been a battle royale, and but the children are coming through, and they are incredible, and they are going to have a different life. So it's an ongoing project. Please go and visit flyingkites.org. It's been a huge part of my life, and strangely, there you go, brilliant. This is it. I mean, like, this is childhood, right? First and foremost, before you start, none of us had an educational background, and this is one of the big critiques that was put against us. Like, what do you kids know about? What do you know about literally? My two co-founders were 21 and 22, and I was 28, 29, something like that. And none of us had a pedagogical background. All we had was our instinct, and my instinct said, you start with what you're seeing on that screen there, which is happy kids playing in a river. That's a bloody good start to me. It doesn't mean you haven't got massive challenges ahead, but it was about get that foundation in place, so at least you have that solid base, and move from there. And believe me, the stories of the mistakes we've made along the way would fill several books, but we never wavered in that desire to excel and put ourselves through the ringer to do that, and have created something I think really special. Go onto the website, go onto the Vimeo, you see some videos from there, and you think how is this being created? And it's pretty special. But it also made us, possibly the first time I realized that this is what it means when you actually have a vision to do something, when you feel against the flow of perhaps conventional wisdom, that you feel this is the right thing to do. And I never forget, there was a guy that we wanted to be on our original board of advisors right at the beginning. It was a family friend, and we asked him to review our initial deck, our initial kind of booklet. And we had written front and center, we want to create a magical environment for children, to raise children. And this guy, he's a finance bloke. I guess he doesn't have much imagination. He never joined the board. He just sort of, he goes, how do you possibly think you can create something magical in Africa? And we didn't change the copy. We just never spoke to him again. But it was like, this is a philosophical, this is what we believe. This is what we believe is possible, and it's going to be a test of our determination to stick to that vision, despite the critiques. And what happened was that the people that, no one said no one hated us, but the people that liked us really loved us because they got it. And I think what happens is and obviously something. This is not the kind of thing where you're having overnight results. This is a long term project. So I think once you'd proven you could survive for the first 5, 6, 7 years, which is when a lot of these non-profits, just never get out of orbit. And once then you're starting to get academic results, once you're starting to get, to build the physical campus, it's a beautiful, stunning campus, then it becomes an easier battle. But I look back now, I'm kind of slightly, I guess we were just bloody-minded, strong-willed little gits that just wouldn't take no for an answer. And we got into plenty of fights, plenty of, philosophical fights with donors, potential donors, local partners who, and look back now, I'm kind of surprised we were so stuck to our guns so much, but it never really felt like a challenge. It always felt like the right thing to do. We all went to, we all were surrounded by people who had excelled, and you looked at the commonality of that. 90% of the cases was they've been given excellent resources, whether it was schooling, whether it was just home life, whether it was, great universities to go to or great mentoring. And it just, there was no, I couldn't see any logic why that wouldn't work in this environment. None of my partners couldn't either. And thankfully, things are going well. So please go and have a look at that. And there's multiple ways to get involved if that is of interest. So that was that. But still, this kind of just some more picture. This, you can see, it was just this stunning. It was just physically inspiring. You got there. Those hills there, they raise up to over 4,000 meters. The equator literally runs like within 10 kilometers of that point there. So you're on the equator, but you're at altitude. So the climate's just amazing. The soil's so fertile. It rains a lot generally. Grow all our own food. It's my favorite place in the world. Oh, actually, we've got another little video, actually. This would be quite fun, yeah. Just if we can cue this one up.
When I grow up, I want to be a singer.
A driver. An aeroplane engineer.
My nickname is Obama because I wanted to be a president.
An air hostess. I'll help some kids how I was helped in flying kites.
Veterinary.
A runner so that I can win for my country. I'd like to be a nurse so that I can help the sick people.
A pilot.
Help the people who are living in other countries.
A doctor. When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut.
Yeah, so you know, however hard it was, I mean, it was never, you know, we were so lucky to have those, you know, all those kids. A lot of those were some of the original, very first group that came and joined us. And you know, that's Alex on a cow, obviously. You know, it was always, you know, it's a very, that we try. You know, I think for me, you want to try and, you know, this is a broad lesson. You know, one wants to create discipline. Discipline is about making people realize the value of self-discipline, but always with a layer of, you know, slightly mad over the top. You know, it's pretty much, you know, I think what I admire about people, for example, quite a lot, you know, it's a very much an army mentality amongst really good soldiers is just knowing when it's time to shut up and work and knowing when it's time to play. I think that knowing that difference, people that don't know the difference are tiresome one way or the other, but being able to, you know, to be able to go and do that with a big grin on your face, and Betsy there was, I don't know if Betsy or Daisy, was quite happy. It just, I don't know. You want that grin for me, just that says everything. So it was that philosophy of, we had there was these 3 golden rules that we kind of came up with at the beginning. One was, and it was work hard, stick together, and dream big dreams. And there are these 3 simple rules, like, you know, you distill everything down into 3, you know, really fundamental rules for life that can apply to almost any situation or any endeavor. Work hard, stick together, don't let your friends down, don't let your family down, don't let your team down, and keep dreaming, keep dreaming those big dreams. And that's kind of what we try to impress upon them as a philosophy. We don't care whether, you do not care how you articulate that, as long as you're not hurting anyone else. And as you saw from that last video, you know, they have the same range of childish dreams and ambitions as any kid in the US, the UK, anywhere else. It was a tenuous line, you know, trying to, there is a kind of postscript to that, which is one has to, you know, in terms of, you know, dreams come with risk. I think I'll touch on this a little bit when I go on to the challenge around this Congo expedition. And they come with risk, which is that if you have big dreams and you fail to realize them, then there is you are poised at the edge of a cliff of disappointment there. So I think one of the things that we've learned most recently is how to couch that third rule, the dream big dreams, in slightly more with the not disclaimer, but with the rider of be aware of what you're entering into. Always going to say, like, generally, you know, there's a risk you need to take, but you have to be careful about encouraging that. If you don't, then provide the means to realize that. So this is I think this might be a video as well. Actually, I'm not sure if that's a slide or a video, but just okay. Well, you watch this. Basically, am I muted? Can we see? Yeah, so trying to, still dying for some adventure. Just was trying to work out how to really tie adventure and development in together, and what role could that play. And one of the things we found, luckily, as you saw from the couple of Flying Kites videos, was that we always went into it and always were in complete agreement that we had to be good storytellers. Relatively few people who you're going to speak to are going to have the chance to go and see these things in person. And if one's raising funds, you've got to be able to craft compelling stories to people who are never actually going to go and witness these things in person. And so it was always, and it was just very conscious that there was an awful lot of chatter out. There is today, then, just so many pressures at one time. How do you cut through that chatter, all that static, to try and make a compelling message? To really make sure it's paid attention to. So I was thinking, okay, look, I want to show the world kind of what's Kenya about, like what is its core characteristics. Like, it's such a wonderful place, such incredible people, so often misunderstood. Let's find out a way to do that. So I thought, okay, Kenya has never had an attempt on Everest, never had an Everest summiteer, despite having an incredible athletic tradition. And pretty big mountain, couple of big mountains in its backyard, Mount Kenya and Kilimanjaro, both very close by. Let's start the Kenyan Everest expedition and get the first climber up Everest. And I look back now and think, what the hell was I even thinking about? But honestly, but yeah, so I started this. It took about a year and a half to get to that. So that's our tent in base camp Everest, with the ice fall behind it, and then Everest then behind that. I over the course of that time selected and trained with an amazing Kenyan climber called Steve Abai. I think we possibly have a picture in that. Oh well, this is us in base camp training. It's me on the left, Steve, and then Mike, a friend of mine, Mike, on the right there. And we had 2 attempts on it, 2014, 2015, which were 2 years when sadly there was 2 great tragedies. One, in 2014, a large group of Sherpas was killed in that icefall, which cancelled rightfully so, cancelled the entire season. And then the year following that, even greater tragedy, which was a huge earthquake, which decimated Nepal, just did terrible damage to Nepal and cancelled that year. So it's an incredibly worthwhile exercise. And Steve was, it's sad because Steve was particularly the second year, I think, was absolutely flying, and I think would have been with as good a chance as anyone on summiting, and would have raised a flag for Kenya on the top of the world, which was really amazing. It wasn't to be. We were lucky we came back with in one piece. A lot of people didn't, so we're grateful for that. For me, I guess the big lesson was, don't try and manage a project like this when you're actually trying to climb as well. That was just not a good plan. But most importantly, that in terms of trying to execute a model of using adventure as a narrative, as a way to, as a narrative hook, you need to find something which has, for a story which, so in Kenya, it was brilliant. Like, we got masses of press, Kenya and Steve's an incredibly warm and engaging person, and Kenya took him to their hearts. And had he come back having summited Everest, he would have been feted as a national hero, undoubtedly, and rightfully so. But we didn't get any traction at all outside of Kenya, because Everest has been done lots of times, and there are very few stories left to tell about it. So I wanted something that was going to resonate with a global audience, because that was really the people I wanted to speak to. I wanted to go and share this, this place that was a second home with me to the world. And, that was the kind of real primary objective. And so I think it needed something which had a bit more, had a bit more of a unique hook. And it was about there. So I'm not sure let's see what the next picture is. So about that time, it was actually between those 2 expeditions. I came back from 2014 expedition and pretty much had the funding in place to go back in 2015. So I didn't have to spend a lot of time raising money for that. And I knew that I didn't want to invest a lot more of my time in that, because I felt it had a kind of limited potential. And then found out that no one had ever walked down the Congo River. And like I said, I'd had this amazing time. A few days I was in Congo when I was on that bike trip, just had this instinctive feeling that that there was a certain destiny somewhere up, in the Congo. I knew that there are some incredibly important stories that needed to be told from the Congo, and a place that probably, as I think we talked about before this talk, where it is stories that come out of Congo are almost uniformly either negative in tone or about negative issues. And that's not without cause. There are some really terrible things that have happened there. But it does mean that the perception of the country is massively skewed, and ultimately does a disservice to the vast majority of people who are incredibly warm, welcoming, wonderful people trying to get by in difficult circumstances, live a life in many ways, which would be very recognizable to all of us. It's a 3,000 miles, as you said earlier. The source, there's numerous tributaries to the Congo River. I chose the one which was the longest you can either choose it by volume, but I chose it by distance. And that tributary literally bubbles out of the ground in northeast Zambia. It's about 6 weeks walking in Zambia to the Congolese border, and then for the rest of the trip will be in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It's a huge country. It's the size of Western Europe. I think it's about 60. I think at the time right now it's about 68 million people. So relatively light density, but at the heart of Africa, and it literally physically at the heart of Africa, and in so many ways influences many things in the region. Has been plagued by violence for a long time. Has a horrendous colonial past. Terrible suffering. Has a very bad post-independence past. Has been the post-Rwandan genocide '94 sent over incredibly destabilizing forces into Eastern Congo. It's incredibly has $24 trillion worth of minerals, roughly, under the soil, and it has timber and and other natural resources. And this has been one of the key drivers for its instability. Where there's money, there's trouble. But these stories have been told 100 times. But we want to tell really positive stories, and we wanted to focus. And we've chosen to focus on women and girls in the Congo. So our goal is to walk this river, do this world first expedition. No one's ever done it before, and in doing so, find and share incredible stories of women and girls, and just provide this alternative perspective. Just a visual. I mean, it's roughly speaking, about 1/3 would be fairly savanna-like. You imagine kind of some variation on your kind of classic, what you might imagine is a classic African environment, fairly dry, fairly dusty, fairly grassy. And then as it goes further north, you come into the rainforests, and it gets progressively denser and hotter and more humid. And it's going to be an absolute slog, no question about it. You can follow that. You can kind of go on Google Maps and dive, do a zoom in, and you can pretty much follow the whole route on Google Maps. It was quite fun. There's quite a few paths, but it's particularly the central section. If you'll see it, the forest is so dense. I think I've got a picture of the rainforest next. It's just hard going. There's a guy called Ed Stafford who walked down the Amazon River, and he famously thought his trip was going to take him a year, and it ended up taking 2 years and 8 months. Which is it's a brilliant book to read. I mean, it's just the psychological, the breakdown he had, the literal breakdown he had midway through, and largely that was because there were days in that trip where they would make no more than 2 miles a day because there was such dense jungle, and there's one big swathe of the route which will be very similar circumstances, and will probably take half the time to go 15% of the distance. And it's, what fascinated me about it was that it's obviously there's it's an incredible physical challenge. We're looking about, I think it's going to take a year. I hope it actually does take a year, rather than Ed, slightly optimistic estimate. And I do think generally think it's more realistic. It's a long time in any regard. It's going to be just a constant sort of physical slog, no doubt. All the mental pressure that comes with that. But it's also just there's a whole political element to it. One has to be very politically astute. We're obviously going in there with something of an activist agenda, and we have to be very careful. My sort of almost my nightmare scenario is that we just get ourselves thrown out. Congo definitely has a history of throwing out anyone vocal, journalists or otherwise, foreign journalists, and just taking them to the airport and throwing them out. They don't do anything more dramatic. They don't sort of chuck us in prison, like that's a good story. Put them on a plane to fly back to London, like that's just like a damp squib. So it's required, there's a subtlety there that's required. It isn't just about putting your head down and smashing it. It isn't just about being able to go in there and tell stories willy-nilly. It's going to be about having the experience and the wisdom to negotiate all of these challenges. The goal is to get to the end. So my incredible teammate Aline Mugishu, who I hope will be able to do a talk on here in the future, incredible life story, gone through stuff that would just boggle the mind, and is currently finishing her doctorate at Columbia University. And her story is just amazing and inspiring. She speaks passionately for the rights of women in Congo, and she's going to be physically walking this trip, this route with me. To have the opportunity to get her, she gets to the end of the route. Not only would she be the first person to walk the Congo River, she would be the first Congolese person to have ever achieved a world first in anything. Well, as I've been reliably told. So to have the opportunity, not just to, it'd be great to get it done. Like from an explorer point of view, adventure point of view, yeah, of course, I'd be super pleased to have the chance to, provide a platform for this amazing woman to speak to the world, to speak on behalf of her fellow citizens, to stand at the end of this, on the beach, at the Atlantic Ocean, and speak to her fellow Congolese about their potential and know that the world's watching is genuinely a once in a lifetime opportunity. And it's the reason why, despite this being one of the hardest, trying to get this expedition off the ground has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Before we even got to the start line, why I just knew that just had to hack it, just had to find a way. So that second Everest expedition wrapped up in 2015. And I've basically been trying to get this thing done since then. And it's been, been incredibly close at times. I set the goal of trying to be a professional explorer on this one. I had to have a budget line. If I was going to, I had to find a way to pay myself. So I went into it with the goal of, bigger budget, find a bigger team, just do everything at a bigger level, because, you've got to work out a way to do this long term. And my team and I came incredibly close. I found an old email. I had to look up to remind myself of something. I found an email from National Geographic, and we'd been in discussions with them for probably 4 months, and they're in development, proper full-on development. And I just happened to come across the email where they said, "Sorry, we're going to pass on this," and that would have been it. Like, we'd have just, if they'd pulled the trigger on that, we'd have gone. Like, we'd just been up and gone out the door. Big budget, just nailed it. And it was, even now, it's 2 years later, it made me feel physically sick. But then suddenly, this is a key lesson. Like, I think it was heartbreaking, and it scared me, because I was thinking, I've done everything right here. Taken every lesson I've ever learned, pulled it together into a package. I've gone out there and I've pitched it to every company, every broadcaster, not taking any shortcuts, and it hasn't worked out. And for me, that was a scary thought, because I felt that wasn't my destiny. And it was really unsettling, because I was 41, I suppose. And you're thinking, like, it's now and ever. And I joked a little bit about having a career, is this a career path? It's not exactly a career path in any normal sense, but there is still that constant desire and pressure to improve on what you've done in the past. And this was a big step up, and I hadn't achieved it. And then suddenly, and it knocked me out for months. I just was eviscerated. It was not just that one; it was the whole process was horrible. And but ultimately, the blessing for me was that I never once doubted that I was going to go. And it just, that takes so much out of, if you're questioning, should I do this? Then it's much harder. If you know that you're going to do it and you've just got to find a way, at least takes that whole component of questioning out, or kind of the whole psychological aspect out of it. And eventually I kind of got the energy up to start, pulling things together. And I'd said, you know what, I wanted to go bigger budget. I wanted to get paid, all that. I'm just going to do it. I don't care. I've done it lean and mean, in the past, just going to have to do one more like that. And that'll just be how it's done. Get it done. Don't leave this thing. I knew I could never let it go. But B, if I did, I would regret it for the rest of my life. You don't have many opportunities like this in a lifetime, and that's the reality. And there's a reality that people there are people who have had to live with gross disappointment in their life, and I just was damned if I was going to. And then suddenly things happen. You started to build an amazing volunteer team here in the UK. And in a way, it felt better because it was very organic, and it was very much everyone on the team. I've got people helping with partnerships, with social media, with PR. They're all people who are really passionate about the project. And it was different from before, where I was working with a professional activation team, and they were very good, super professional, but it lacked a little bit of soul. This has been more grassroots. Startup hustle. Let's make it work. And we're very close to being able to go. And like I say, I don't care. Like, I'm committed. I'm like the gambler at the table. Like, I should have walked away. If I was going to walk away, it was hours ago. I'm all in. I'm either gonna roll a snake eyes and come away with millions, or I'm gonna go in the drunk tank probably. So but that's it. Like, it's total. It's real commitment. I mean, it doesn't feel like commitment. It just is. I'm all in. And I think ultimately sometimes that, you look at history, and again, any number of scenarios, very often when you have no other choice, you find a way. You do find a way because you have to. So this is a nice picture. This is one of my teammates, Simone, here, and this is fascinating. So you look at her, very pretty girl, slightly built, doesn't look like like a strong wind could blow her over, and yet she done some incredible stuff. She spent years in incredibly challenging places. And I asked her to join the team. I never met her in person. I had never met her in person, but I'd seen what she'd done. I'd seen the spirit she'd done it with, and I thought, you've got it. And it's always, it's very often people that you least expect that have it. This is something, because it's in the head. It's something like this. When you're talking about a year, this is people ask, how do you train for this? It's like, I don't know. You just basically to stay fit, but ultimately, this is not going to be about being super fit on day one. It's going to be about having the mental fortitude to keep going over 365 days, knowing that there's going to be days when you're, being knocked on your backside. And she has it. They all have it. Aline has it. It's just something in there that is just different, and you look for it, and it's very rare. So this is it. These are the stories you want to tell these kids here. So keep watching that. It's walkthecongo.com. Does what it says on the tin. One way or the other, I will be going, and I'm very, very lucky for it.
Toby, honestly, it's beyond fascinating. I didn't want to interrupt you, to be honest. And unfortunately, we're slightly pushed for time, so I'm going to get through 3 or 4 questions if I can.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Right, I won't talk anymore. Apart from guest 320 has asked, what would you say to a younger person about finding their career future who doesn't know what they want to do?
Brilliant. Yeah, no, and this is definitely what I'd want to conclude with is, I've taken my life in a particular direction, right? I was lucky in a way that it was forced to go in a particular direction early on. And I was lucky I had supporting parents and all the rest of it. I was able to have the chance to think that through. I think the key thing is first and foremost, get your education. I know it sounds really basic. Get that foundation under you, whichever way you want to take it. I'm not necessarily all for a traditional education, whether it's GCSE A-levels degree, whether it's GCSEs then onto vocational, whatever it might be. Get that foundation in place. I can't emphasize that strongly enough. And then it's about try and just give yourself the mental space to think. And have an honest conversation with yourself. There are so many pressures. Of course, there are pressures from school, from teachers, from parents. Not necessarily the well-meaning pressures from society in general. There's financial pressure. There's all kinds of stuff which make it very hard necessarily to think through strategically, if you like, what would you want to do with your life. And that could be anything. I think living adventurously for me is about that basic honesty. I don't, obviously I'm a huge advocate for getting outside and going and doing stuff. I think and I would massively encourage people to do anything like that. But I think living adventurously starts with an honest conversation with yourself and the courage to trust that voice that says, I want to do X or Y, despite everyone else saying I shouldn't be doing that. I think the next piece to that is that you have the honest conversation, you try and at least come up with a ballpark of what you're looking for, and then understand that, particularly if you're doing something like what I'm doing, or, that might come with a whole host of challenges that, you've got to accept that if I do this, I'm not going to have the comfort zone of a salary or, a traditional pension, things like this, that it comes with. You might have to accept that if I want A, I'm going to have to accept B. So that's important to know. Or that, if you want something unusual, you're going to have to work twice as hard. Bottom line is, like I said, those 3 golden rules of flying kites started with work hard. Like nothing can or nothing should be achieved without hard work. The hard work is what makes it valuable. So I think it's that's what I would say. It's about and I think time-wise, like I said, when I, at 21 to 23, when I felt my time slipping away, I remember how it felt eternally, like I was wasting so much time as a young person who had been on a regular, who'd done everything according to the plan, right? And I'm not saying don't put pressure on yourself to make progress, but also don't freak out if by 20, in your early 20s, even to late 20s, you haven't got it right. I've seen a lot of people who thought they were very contented through their 20s and early 30s on traditional career paths who are much less so now. It's far better, far better to take your time to work it out in that period of time and get it right, or at least again, get it within broad parameters, get it right, than to rush into it and get it wrong and realize it's fundamentally once you get over 30, and so particularly when you get older than that, it just gets much harder to make changes. You might have family, you might have mortgage. It just psychologically gets harder. You don't have the same mental flexibility. And I know for me it was a bit later than that, but there's a point where you realize this is hard. I don't know if I can pivot again. Just take that time, get it right, get out there, meet other people, and just really think, what is it that excites you? What is it that's effortless for you to do? In a way, like you shouldn't, yes, you can have to work hard, but in a way, like when I'm doing this, adventure stuff, like I love it. Like it just comes out of a gut level place. So if you can identify what it is that excites you at that level, that is the best starting point.
Guest 943 has asked, you've achieved so much. What else is on your bucket list apart from walk the Congo?
Nothing. To get this done, I won't.
Yeah.
I will not let myself think beyond that. And I honestly, it's nice to say that. For me, it feels, the drop. It's all. This is the closing of a circle. This is the pressure I'm under, which is good pressure because I think pressure is such a really positive thing. But honestly, if I couldn't close a circle, I would feel it had all been. No, it hadn't been pointless. Of course, it hadn't. But this is the ending of one part of my life. I feel this would close one piece off. What comes next? I know people do ask that. You shouldn't be wasting time thinking about something that is so. There's so much to do before that. And I know that with this done, there'd be many opportunities. No, crucially, it's in this. Very often you want to look further ahead. In this case, it's about very much staying focused on what's exactly in front of me right now. Don't trip over your own feet. And just being honest, I feel that this, to have any sense of peace of mind and contentment, I have to get this done. So but there is, I haven't got a family. I need to have, I need to get married. I need to have some kids. I need to, there's lots of kind of normal stuff I haven't done that would be quite nice at some point.
And last question, just to let everyone else know, we're going to try and get as many of these questions as we can to Toby, and we're going to see if he can answer them, and we'll try and get them on the website as well. So please don't think that if you've not been able to answer your question that it won't get answered at all. We're going to do our best to make sure that as many of them are as possible. Just a final question for you, because I know that we're pressed. How do you deal with the rejection of something that you trained for a long time?
I guess you get to the point where you know that it's simply part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this is really a good point. I think one thing I would really encourage people is to embrace failure, embrace that rejection, because you will never, ever, ever, ever become your true self if you haven't gone through that. It's impossible. It doesn't matter what level you're aspiring to. And you will see this so often. You look at any athlete, anyone who has excelled in any fields, whether it's science, literature, whatever it might be, you are molded by the rejections. And if you're lucky enough to get an easy path to success, you will be a lesser version of yourself. You might have had an easier path, and I could craft an alternative path for my life where it was far easier. But I know that I would not be who I am today. I call it putting patina on your character. It's what you take your raw born self, whatever that might be, and through the battles is what hardens you up, and you have to be in that place. So how do you take it? It can be rough, and obviously the scale of the rejection scale of that is consonant with the scale of what was out there. So when it was Nat Geo and it was a multi-million-dollar deal to be able to realize this project that was so dear to me. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I felt like it took me months to get over it, and I'm not going to pretend that was easy. But ultimately, I even at the worst moment there, I remember thinking, this is going to put you get through this and get on that thing. Get on that trail. This is going to put extra strands of steel in your spine, because you're going to be thinking, when you come up against an obstacle, you're going to be thinking, I did not come this effing far and take that kind of stuff to give up now. So you can internalize that, and it's hard, and there's nothing wrong. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with days where you've gone away and had literally have a cry, or just say, some days you say, I've had enough today. I'm switching off. I'm just done with it, and I almost imagine something almost, for me, it's almost like a physical sensation of, I almost imagine like a wave, just if you're kind of on, on the edge of the ocean, just letting the waves like wash over you. Sometimes you just have to switch off. It can be, I look at it as it's been a psychological roller coaster, but I'd never, it's one of those things you can't experience the highs if you don't have the lows. And it's, the pleasure, as I'm closing in on this departure, I mean, it's a kind of a depth of human psychology, or, that you just want to experience. I mean, it's very easy that, do you really want a life where it's, nothing ever happens, nothing bad ever happens, nothing really very good ever happens, but you got to put yourself out there and risk, you risk the pain, the risk of failure and all the rest of it, but it's only through that you have the chance of the kind of elation that comes from a great victory. And my last bit was just to say, and the reason this made sense to me when I remember reading an article about Johnny Wilkinson, that when he just after he'd won the World Cup, and he said the best moment for him was the sort of half a second between when he saw the referee go to blow, not when he kicked a drop goal, not even afterwards, but this moment when just before, as the referee went to pick up, he picked his whistle up, and he knew in that half second before he blew it that the game was over. There was nothing the Australians could do to alter the thing. And there's this moment of just complete, just calm and perfection, and that moment there. And it's like, and I remember thinking, I'm so jealous you've had a moment like that, like just this moment where everything is right in the world. And I just want my moment like that. And it's obviously not going to be on the rugby field, but it's, to have something where there's that intensity of emotion. And think about it, very few people are lucky enough to have something like that. So, but you can't, there is no easy way to do it. He, what he personally went through to get to that point, obviously was an unbelievable journey. And I'm happy to embrace all the bad bits if I get just 1 second of that, perhaps at the Atlantic Ocean in 2 years' time.
Toby Storie-Pugh, and I think your whistleblowing moment will probably be when you're crossing the line at Waterloo Congo. Honestly, thank you so much for everything that you've spoken about this morning. You've been absolutely phenomenal, and we've had so many questions through. I think everyone is beyond fascinated with your journey as well. So thank you so much. And like I said to everyone as well, your questions, we'll try and get them answered, and we'll get them on the website. So make sure that you do check the website as much as you can. So thank you all to everyone who's been watching. And we're like I mentioned earlier, we're raising money for the Children's Trust. The donation link is on the screen for you now, thechildrenstrust.org.uk/donate. So please do donate anything that you can via the link on your screen now. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow for 10:30 a.m. where we'll be talking to BAFTA winning filmmaker and wildlife cinematographer Sophie Darlington. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.